Welcome to the second of the seminars regarding men's health. It's great to see good attendance. I'd like to introduce myself. My name's Ian. I'm a physiotherapist who works at the hospital, and I'm also the head physiotherapist of the Gibraltar Football Association. So men's health is something I deal with on a regular basis, and women's, of course. I'd like to thank the organisers for asking me to open the seminar. I think it's about a topic which is very, very important, and I think it's something which we really need to push forward. I'm a physiotherapist by trade. Cancer is involved in a lot of my questioning during my assessments, but I did have to perform some research regarding male cancer. And looking at all the research, there were a couple of statistics which really were quite surprising. One of them, which was quite surprising, was the testicular cancer. I found out that almost 47% of freshly diagnosed cases in the UK are below the age of 35, and that was something which was quite alarming because I'm almost 35, I'm below 35, and I wasn't aware of this. And I'm a health professional, and I work in the hospital, and that really got me thinking about how many times people may think about testicular cancer. And I'll be perfectly honest, I've never really thought of it, even though I spend most of my day asking patients about their health and about signs and symptoms related to potential cancer. I've never really thought about it. And I can probably guarantee you that the majority of under 35s haven't either. And they haven't purposefully checked for it, or maybe they're unaware of how to do so. And that was quite important to me because I wouldn't have known this if I wouldn't have been asked to have given this speech. And I'm a health professional, I work in the hospital. There was another statistic which was quite surprising, was the fact that it's got such a high survival rate. And that sort of reinforces the fact that it's a travesty when people lose their life to a disease which has such a high survival rate because of potential embarrassment or the fact that they're too macho to admit to symptoms. The other sort of major cancer which I was looking at was prostate. It's a much more serious and prevalent cancer, and it's the second most common cancer in the UK, and that was quite alarming. I also, one of the things which actually surprised me the most was above 50% of the actual diagnosed cancers in males in the UK are in men over the age of 70, which was alarming. Why has it taken somebody until the age of 70 to seek medical advice or to act upon symptoms? And looking at the statistics, 95% of men who are diagnosed with prostate cancer between the ages of 50 and 69 have a 5-year plus survival rate. If you delay this to the point of 80 and over, that drops down to about 66%. So there's a massive drop in survival rates. And yes, of course, age has something to do with it, but why are people gambling with time, and why are they gambling with their lives and their health? And I wouldn't play Russian roulette. I'm sure many others wouldn't. So why are we doing it with our health? What are the barriers? Why are people delaying reporting of symptoms? Is it because they're not aware of them? Is it because they think it's wear and tear or old age? And I think awareness is the biggest issue, and something which people need to understand, that yes, things do go wrong in the body. Not everything is normal. So there's no embarrassment about admitting symptoms. You know, there's no loss of pride, or you know, men are not invincible. You know, we're susceptible to disease. We need to be honest to ourselves, and if you're not going to do it for yourself, do it for your loved ones. All the unnecessary deaths each year, when things could have been prevented, it really is a crying shame. So all these stats which I was looking at, they really sort of, you know, left an impression on me. And I do work with a lot of men, and I will be making sure that we do push the awareness, no matter the age, as I discovered myself. And I think what we're trying to do here in this whole campaign is excellent, and I think it's something which we all need to sort of spread the message. Before I carry on mumbling, I'm going to introduce Professor Ian Banks, who's the European Men's Health Forum President, and I'd like to thank you for your time. And Mr. Ian Banks.
Ian, thank you very much indeed. It's a bit like buses. There's one Ian here, you've got another Ian over there. You're waiting for a bus and three come along. This fella lived on the same street as I did in Liverpool. Never knew each other. On the same street, imagine, and it was two Ians. It's incredible coincidence. Anyway, so it's great to be here back in Gibraltar again. And incidentally, you're right about the testicular cancer. More men will die from breast cancer than will die from testicular cancer. Isn't that incredible? And we had a guy here, do you remember last time we had the meeting, didn't know men could get breast cancer. And so a lot of men, of course, they wait for too long when they've got something like breast cancer. You're absolutely right, Ian, about this. Anyway, it's great to be back in Gibraltar. We're going to have a bit of fun as well as talk some serious stuff. But I got off the plane yesterday, and I walked across the runway. Geez, it was hot. And your runway, it must be the only runway which is actually as wide as it is long. It looks like that when you come down on the plane. Anyway, it doesn't look that long, but it isn't half wide when you're walking across it with the sun shining over your head. It seems to go on forever. And I got as far. I was carrying a big bag, and I got as far as the Angry Friar, and which is just before Trafalgar Road, and onto the graveyard there. And I thought, I'll just call in here, because it was so hot, any excuse. So anyway, so I went in, and it was full, absolutely full. Inside, it was full. It was cooler inside than it was outside. So I went inside, and there were all these men and women, and the television was on. Has anybody ever been in the Angry Friar? Everybody been in the Angry Friar? No, nobody's been in the Angry Friar. Good God. All right, anyway. I didn't believe we got 100% teetotalers in the room. I couldn't believe it. Not with alcohol at three quid a litre. I couldn't believe it. Anyway, so I looked in there, and it was full of men and women, absolutely full. And all the men were watching the TV, and the women were all talking to each other. And when I looked at what was on the TV, it was all about cancer. Now that was weird, because I would have put money on that the women would have been watching the television about cancer, and the men would have all been talking to each other. And it was the opposite. And what I think was actually happening was, they all looked like regulars. In fact, a few of them looked as though they were a bit too regular, in there. But anyway, but they were all regulars by the looks of it, and they felt at home there, and they didn't feel confronted by what was on the television. In other words, they were able to watch it without feel as if they were being attacked in a way. Now, where would you reckon be the most alien place for a man to have to talk about health? Probably a doctor's surgery. That would be probably one of the most alien of places to actually be, to open your heart about talking about health. But in a pub, you see, when they're with their mates and they're relaxed and they can talk about things without it being confrontational, that's what I think was going on. That they were actually watching about cancer because they were able to watch about cancer. They didn't feel as though it was attacking them, over it all. So then I carried on walking up to the Rock Hotel, which is just the completely opposite end of Gibraltar, I have to tell you. There's a hill goes up to it. It's a long hill. It goes up there. And by the time I got up there, I honestly did not look like a men's health expert, I can tell you. I was not a role model for men's health by the time I got up there. But it's great, absolutely great to be back again. And we've got a lot of fun, but we've also got a lot of serious stuff to talk about. Cancer, it's the funny thing about men is that there are jokes about almost anything to do with health. But I defy anybody in this room to give me a joke about ovarian cancer. Does anybody know a joke about ovarian cancer? I don't know one. Women don't joke about these things. They don't need to, because women confront the issue head on, whereas men tend to deflect it a bit. So they joke about it as if it's not actually that serious kind of thing. So you think of all the dark humour kind of jokes that you hear from men. Come on in, you haven't missed anything. Think about the dark humour kind of jokes that are out there. I won't go through them because some of them you couldn't repeat in public, kind of thing. But you know what I'm getting at. And that's the way men do deal with a serious issue, is by joking about it, by actually turning it, deflecting it, so it's not quite as serious as, as maybe it is actually. So this is what we're going to be talking about tonight. And we're going to be talking about how can we actually get men to get diagnosed quicker with cancer. That's what we're really going to do. And we've got guys here who actually have had cancer. John here is sitting at the front. He knows what he's talking about. That's the kind of thing we're going to do. We're going to ask him, what was going through your head at that time, kind of stuff, We've got experts in the room. Put your hands up, please, all the experts. All the nurses and the pharmacists. Put your hands up. Come on, we want to see you. Come on. There you go. These are the experts. These are the people who you'll be able to ask questions of, and I'm certainly going to ask them questions of. And they've given a bit of warning, about what we're going to be talking about. So they're not all scared to death, in case they don't know the answer. And bear in mind, I don't know the answer to most of what we're going to be talking about. I'm no smartass. I don't know the answers to a lot of these things. You're going to ask me questions. I don't know the answers to some of these things. So, but at least we can be honest and say, we don't know. We don't know. Maybe we should know, about these things. But what we're going to do is we're going to go through quickly a little presentation here. I'm going to go through this really quickly, just to give you some insight into why we're having this meeting. And you have to excuse me a minute. I'm using this machine. I'm totally deaf, by the way. I also have a problem with my eyes as well. I'm just exactly the kind of doctor you do not want to see coming towards you with a scalpel. Deaf and blind. Brilliant. Imagine the diagnosis you're going to get. So we're going to go through this really quickly. And Stephen's up at the back here. He was very kindly pressing the button for me. So it might be a little bit sort of ragged as we go through. Does anybody know what's going on here? What's going on here? What is this? This big red thing. What is it? Anybody? Come on. It's the sun. Yeah? What's the big black dot? It's Venus, where women come from, isn't that right? Men come from Mars, women come from Venus, that's what he said. Anyway, this is Venus moving across the surface of the sun. And it happens about every 200 years, something like that, okay? Pretty regular. And it's been going on for countless millions and millions of years. Venus has been moving across the surface of the sun. And Stone Age man and woman looked up at it and didn't mean anything. Didn't mean anything to them at all, okay? And then in the 1700s, they sent a sailing ship from Greenwich, just outside London, from Greenwich into the southern hemisphere with a telescope and a clock. And they had the same telescope and the same clock back in Greenwich. And they timed Venus moving across the surface of the sun. And they brought the clock back from the southern hemisphere and they compared the two clocks, the one which was timed in the northern hemisphere and the one which timed us in the southern hemisphere. And when they looked at those clocks, they were different. Because one was in the southern hemisphere and one was in the northern hemisphere, obviously. But because of that difference, they could triangulate and they could work out the distance from the Earth to Venus, from the Earth to the Sun, from Earth to every then known member of the solar system. In the 1700s, they did that. In other words, somebody noticed a difference and acted upon it. And that is what is essential. It's not just noticing something. It's noticing it and then doing something about it. And that's what the basis of medicine is all about, really. Noticing that something is different and quintessentially acting upon that difference. And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. So I'm going to take you through quickly some of these slides to show you what a difference can make when you notice a difference and you act upon it. Steve, next one, please. This is the stereotypical image of men and women. Isn't that right? The top one's a woman, the bottom one's a man, right? Women can multitask. That's the stereotypical image. Women can do the makeup, drive, whack the kids, listen to the radio, all at the same time. Whereas for men, if they even have to turn the radio on, or worse still, have to ask for directions, everything falls to bits. Men would sooner drive round and round in circles than wind that window down and say, excuse me, do you know where Trafalgar Road is, please? Or do you know where the Angry Friar is, please? They sooner go, don't laugh, don't laugh. There was a guy on a bus in New York, sat on the bus for 2 days because he didn't want to ask where the stop was and just went round and round. I kid you not on this. But it is something about us men that we're supposedly this. Now, I don't know if it's true or not, and frankly, I don't care. You know, I really don't care. Because you can have an awful long discussion, fruitless discussion. What is the difference in women and men? You know, masculinity and femininity. I really don't care. It's what the difference makes. That's what I care about. Does it make a difference in the way that men think about health, for instance, compared to the way women think about health? Next slide, please. But when they actually look at the brain, it might actually be true, this, because when you look at the neural pathways in the brain, and we've got any neurologists here at the moment, but if you look at the pathways, you can see, if you look at the top there, can you see the way the pathways are running in the hemispheres up and down? You see that? That's for and if you look at the pathways here, they cross into the two hemispheres. Women, according to this, are like dolphins. Dolphins can swim and sleep at the same time. And this is supposedly the difference between, I don't know if it's true. I really don't. And as I say, I don't care. But I do care about the next slide, please, Steve. I do care about this. Because this is the difference in life expectancy for men and women across all of Europe. And in every country in the world, except for Tonga, women live longer than do men. And this is what we have to ask ourselves. Why is that? Why is it so constant? And why is it that the ratio, you see the ratio is changing between the life expectancy of men and women? In other words, it's not just genetic. It's not just that you are pre-programmed as a man to drop dead early, like some kind of Mission Impossible tape. You know, should you choose to accept the challenge, you will drop dead at the age of 55 kind of thing. It's not that. It must be something else, and that's what we're going to talk about when it comes to cancer. Let's have the next slide, Stephen. Look at these numbers, and these are the only numbers I'm going to ask you to remember, okay? See these numbers at the side here? These are the premature deaths. This is deaths before the age of 75, okay? Now, where I'm coming from, 75 is young, right? So these are deaths before the age of 75, and you can see 60% in men, 40% in women, all right? Now, remember those numbers. Right, next slide, Steve. Now, these are the number of preventable deaths. The deaths that shouldn't have happened, that had there been medical treatment soon enough, they would not have happened. And look at the numbers. They're exactly or near exactly the same. In other words, it's 61 there and 39 there, okay? In other words, the majority of those deaths in men were preventable. That's what we're trying to say. And that's what's so important about today. And it's interesting that we've got more women in this room than we've got men in a men's health meeting. And that's always the same. You always find that more women are interested about men's health than men themselves. It's a fascinating insight, but I'm afraid it's true. So can we have the next slide? Now, this is the survival from cancer right across Europe. And this, for me, tells us everything. Who's nurses? How many nurses have we got in the room? Put your hands up, please, all the nurses, okay? Right, now, your job, okay? Your job is made harder by these kind of statistics, okay? Look, Slovenia, down here, okay? Look at the difference between the survival of men and women from cancer in Slovenia. Now look at the difference in survival rate in Sweden. Now tell me, the clever nurses, okay, you've had your, how many years of training? God, 6 years, whatever. You tell me, can that be genetic? That gives you that kind of set of statistics. It can't be genetic. Because it would be the same in each country if it was genetic. But look at the difference in survival. What on earth is going on when the men fail to survive nearly as long in Slovenia as they do in Sweden? I refuse to believe that Slovenian men are that genetically different from men in Sweden. I refuse to believe that. It has to be something about what is going on over there in Slovenia compared to what is going on there in Sweden. In other words, and we're going to be talking about this, about late presentation, we're going to be talking about that in a few moments. It is something that we can do something about. That's what's important. It's not just there for us to say, ugh, like the Stone Age man. We see that difference, and we must act upon it to find out what is going on. So next slide, Steve. I'm going to not go through all of these, but if you look at the tops of here, malignant neoplasm of liver, if you look at colon, if you look at esophagus, if you look at all of them, what strikes you? More common in men, more deaths in men. Next slide, Stephen. Again, bronchus and lung, pancreas, every single cancer common to both sexes is more common in men, and more men will die than will women from those cancers, except for 2 cancers, that's all, except for 2. Now, why is that? Why should that be the way it is? And that's what we're going to look at tonight. Next slide, please. Still, even non-Hodgkin's, look, still more men each time, look. Now, next slide, Steve. Now, this is the exception to the rule. This is melanoma. Who's our skin specialist? Is it Linda? Yes, we've got Linda here, and I've got Nuria. Yeah? Where are you? Here. Right. We're going to be talking. This is melanoma, okay? We're going to come to you in a moment to talk about basal cell carcinoma and melanoma, okay, in a few minutes, okay? This is melanoma, nasty skin cancer. Very tight window of opportunity. You go early to the doc, you survive. You go late to the doc, you die. It's as stark as that. That's one of the most deadly cancers you can have. The incidence, the number of people who will develop melanoma is higher in women than it is in men, although it's starting to get closer now, it's starting to get the same. Next slide, please, Stephen. But the mortality is much higher in men. Now, we've got some very clever people up here who do a lot of very good work to do with skin cancer. Tell us, why do you think that men have a lower incidence, in other words, they develop melanoma less than do women, and yet they die more often from it? Tell us about melanoma.
Melanoma is often, melanoma, although there is a genetic part to it, we're going to talk about the exposure to the sun. Melanoma is caused in a large part by their sun exposure. Women tend to have more sun exposure than men. They go to the beach, they like to have the nice tan. The reason why men, I think, from my experience, have less of a survival rate is they don't tend to come until the wife has given them a lot of grief and said you've got to go and get it seen, and it's usually at a much further advanced stage.
Tell us, what should the men in this room, what should the women in this room, for that matter, what should they be looking for with melanoma? What should they be watching out for?
Well, with melanoma and with any of the skin cancers, because you won't necessarily know what it is, the difference. That's our job to sort of find out. Anything that is brand new, that you've never had there before, anything that's growing, irregular edges, itching, bleeding, not healing, crusting that you don't understand. We have lots of posters and this information for you to take later. Changes that are not part of your normal body. You may have lots of moles all your life, and one of them in particular looks different suddenly to the others. Those are giving you a warning sign that you need to come and get them checked.
Okay, well, sitting behind you is a pharmacist. Okay? Now, I'm a man, and I've come into the pharmacy. I'm one of the very rare men who ever come into your pharmacy. I'm going to ask you in a moment, why do you think men don't come into the pharmacy? I'm going to ask you. But melanoma, skin cancer, okay? What do you reckon a man, or for that matter a woman, might come into the pharmacist if they've actually got something like skin cancer? Why do you think they might come into the pharmacy? For what?
You mean if they've got a mole that looks odd or different?
Yeah. What would they say to you?
They'd probably come in and say, do you think this looks odd? I've never seen this before. Can you tell me if this is normal or not? And we can tell the difference. We can ask them questions and find out whether or not that's something that's always been there or something that's changed. And then we can refer them to a specialist if they need to.
Okay. but let's say I'm a guy now. I don't even know what melanoma means. Okay, what might I come to see you and ask you for, if I didn't know that there was such a thing as melanoma? What are the kind of things that alarm bells would start to go off to say, why are they asking for these products? What might they be asking for this mold?
Well, they'll probably be thinking that it might be a bite or something like that. They're probably going to be coming in for antihistamine creams or antihistamine tablets, saying that they think they've got a rash, when actually it's not a rash, so it's not a bite. It's something more serious.
So what's the key thing then? If it's not a horsefly bite, if it's not a wasp, if it's not, what is the most important thing to be able to say about that to them, to make sure they're going to be safe?
To go and see the doctor, basically. Come see us first, find out whether it is something serious or not, and then go and see the doctor if it is.
Well done. Okay, thank you very much for that.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Is it not strange
Use
that...
the microphone.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Is it not strange that in the last three countries, Spain, Portugal, Greece, where people are most exposed to the sun, the death rate should be lower than Norway, Sweden, where they hardly see the sun?
Very good question. Very good question. Incidentally, I need to tell you something. This is being live streamed at the moment. I hope that's okay with everybody. So don't say anything horrible at your wife or your husband, because they'll be listening to you on this. But it's a very, very good question. I don't know, do you want to answer that? Why it should be? Why do you think it should? Even if you don't know, why do you think that could be? It's a very good question.
We want to know is why they don't survive so much in those countries rather than
No,
upper
it's
Europe.
surprising that people in Spain, Portugal, Greece were the most exposed to the sun as compared to Norway, Sweden, etc. Yet the survival rate is much higher.
I think it's twofold. One is that these countries there, they tend to have, I read a paper recently, these countries tend to have a siesta in the afternoon, which keeps them at the main hours of the sun. And two, the education towards the fact of public information is higher in countries where there is a lot of more sun exposure. Whereas you get countries where there's less sun exposure, the campaigns are limited to very short periods of time. It's not something that's discussed all year round. So for me, that would be one of the reasons why certain countries have better survival.
And we saw that, it's the right answer, we saw that in Scotland, where there was a sudden massive increase in melanoma, and in fact both types of skin cancers. And what it turned out to be was the sunbeds. Particularly women were using sunbeds, and by banning the sunbeds, that actually stopped the peak in it. And we also found it in Sweden. And if you look at a Swede, they hardly ever see the sunlight. You know, and they even wear little hats with lights on them. I don't know if you've ever been up to the north of Sweden, but they go around with these little hats with a light shining down on their face so that they don't become depressed. I swear, honest to God, it seems to work. It seems to work. But their skin is so pale that they really are at risk if they go out in the sun. Now there's a myth that black people don't develop melanoma. That's not true. They do develop melanoma, but it's not as common as in white skin. But they still can develop melanoma. So there's an interest in skin cancer. Now the good news about this is two bits of good news, and you'll know this, both of you will know this. First of all, number one is it's almost totally preventable if you use your brain about this. And secondly, there is actually now a treatment for melanoma, which is quite incredible, one of these miracles. It doesn't happen very often, but it really is a miracle cure for melanoma. It only works in certain people who have got the right genetic background for it. But you can actually, there are people who are living now and they don't know how long they're going to live for. Whereas once upon a time, if you were diagnosed, if I diagnosed melanoma in someone that I knew, particularly if they'd had it for a long time, they only had months to live. Now they're living past 5, 6, into 10, 6 years on. So there are wonderful cures coming up, but the best thing is don't get it in the first place. And that's the problem with men is that we don't examine the bits that we can't see. And so if a mole is changing on your back, most men will not know about it until either their partner points it out to them and says there's something going on here. or it starts to bleed and the shirt gets a blood stain on, and so then they notice it. I don't know what's on. I could have God Save the Queen tattooed on my back. I have no idea what my back looks like. My wife knows what my back looks like, but I have no idea. Men don't examine themselves in mirrors. Women do examine themselves in mirrors. So they pick it up much faster. If the change in role is on the leg, or if it's on the face or the hands, men are much more likely to come sooner rather than later. But living in Gibraltar is a classic, because living in Gibraltar means you're exposed more to that UV light shining down, straight down. Even if you walk through the streets, through Main Street, as I did yesterday, the sun was straight overhead and you couldn't get into the shade. You know where to run except the Angry Friar, which was okay because it was nice and cool in there. Next slide, please, Stu. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. When I was a young doctor, if somebody had shown me this graph, I would have laughed. I would have said, that's a nonsense. That will never, ever happen. These are the numbers of people who develop oral cancer and cervical cancer, okay? So that top line, I'm sorry, I don't have a pointer. The top line is cervical cancer, and you can see how it has declined right down here. Look, you see that? Now, this blue line is the oral cancer in men. And look what's happened. In 1999, there were as many cases of oral cancer as there was of cervical cancer. I would have said that was totally impossible when I was a young doctor. I would have said that's absolute nonsense. In fact, it's got worse in terms of oral cancer. The oral cancer is still increasing. So what's happening? Right, let's have the next slide, Steve. This is what's happening. Nobody even knew about HPV, the human papilloma virus. This is the virus which causes cervical cancer. If you haven't got that virus, the chances of you developing cervical cancer are really very small. That's why the HPV vaccine is so important for girls. It can actually eliminate cervical cancer. In Ireland, we're trying to eliminate the whole of Ireland of cervical cancer by vaccinating all the girls. But cervical cancer is not very common in men. You've probably noticed that. It's fairly rare in men, cervical cancer. But this guy developed oral cancer. What caused his oral cancer was the same virus that causes cervical cancer in women. And it's on a big increase. And it's taken a lot of men's lives, and most men never even knew about it until this guy suddenly went public and told everybody what it was all about. He was blaming it on oral sex, wasn't it? Really well have been. But it's the virus is what we're talking about. So what the message here is why don't we vaccinate the boys as well? It takes two to tango. And also, it will protect the gay guys at the same time. So the gay guys will be protected, the straight guys will be protected, and the girls will be protected if we vaccinate both girls and boys. And it is a tragic shame that there are men dying who didn't have to die had they had been vaccinated as a child with HPV vaccine. So the message here is get both your girls and your boys vaccinated, and the pharmacist will help you. You can actually buy the thing if you can't get it on the NHS. Right, give us the next slide. Now, why is all this happening? It's because men are less likely to see a GP, less likely to attend for a health check, less likely to opt for bowel cancer screening, and less likely to visit a pharmacy and have a dental checkup. In other words, men generally use the health services, plural, less well than they actually could. I'm going to go into specifics now in a moment. Let's give us the next slide. This is probably what the problem is. Right? Is that the guys are coming along a bit too late. That's what is probably happening. The other problem is that men aged 18, for instance, have no idea how to actually even make an appointment to see their GP. Do you know why? Because their mothers made their appointments with the GP. And when they left the home, they didn't know how to do it. They had no idea. So they just hung on and hoped it would go away, kind of thing. This is the result. Next slide, Stephen. This is part of the problem. Now, this is the cover of the British Medical Journal. Right? So this is doctors. And we were really chuffed way back when they decided to do the entire edition on men's health. We thought, brilliant, we've finally got men's health on the radar. Finally, we're going to talk about men's health. and then they stuck this picture on the front. That is, if you like, the stereotypical image of men. And if that's what doctors think men are, then God help the man in the street, because that's what doctors are thinking a man is on the cover of the British Medical Journal. I mean, and it won an award. That was even worse. The cover got an award for the cover of it as well. Just to rub the salt into the wound. Give us the next slide, Sam. Let me get down to it. This is not my newspaper, by the way, the Daily Mail. You get it free on the aeroplane, so I read. I can only read about 3 pages before I feel like committing suicide. You know, reading the stuff. God, it's the most depressing newspaper I've ever read. But in it was this. Okay. Now, who have we got here from the prostate cancer charity? We've got John right here, sitting right at the front. Okay, I'm going to be coming to you in a couple of minutes. Just talk about your experience, okay, of cancer. Now, this is, if you like, the man's brain thinking here. They did bowel cancer screening in England, and they decided they wanted to find out, first of all, what would put men off and what would put women off from taking part in the bowel cancer screening program. Now, you know how they do this. It's very simple. You just take a bit of feces, you put it in a tube, and you send it off, and they examine it for any blood that's in the feces. And it doesn't mean say you've got cancer, but it means you might have, and so therefore you've got to do something about it. But they asked women and they asked men what would put them off taking part in that screen. For women, it was embarrassment. Was the number one, embarrassment in taking part in the whole thing. I mean, it's not everybody's idea of a good day out, is it? You know, giving his bum scratching and not very nice. But for men, it was this. It was the fear of the diagnosis which put them off. They didn't want to know, basically. This is the male brain speaking. If you don't ask about it, you won't get it. As soon as you ask about it, then you're going to get it. So don't ask. The less you know about it, the better, because as soon as you know about it, you'll get it. So don't ask. You see, that's the male brain thinking here. And that's what put them off. So they have to target separately. But it's not just bowel cancer. There are lots of cancers where early diagnosis makes such a massive difference. John, just tell us briefly your experience with prostate cancer, would you? Just
my own experience.
Yes, your own experience, very briefly, but just.
Well, I was diagnosed in 2004, and I had no idea what PSA was.
Okay.
And I went to the doctor because I had backache, small backache, and my wife insisted of having a full blood count. And I came up with a count of 95, and I was rushed off to Royal Aston. And it was localized, but it already had gone out to the seminal vessel, so there was no chance of. Sorry.
Okay, no, don't worry. Let me stop you though, because you said something very important. You said that you didn't know what PSA is. Had you ever had a PSA test before you did that?
Never. I was 64 at the time, and I hadn't had it.
Okay, right. Prostate-specific antigen, PSA, okay, or promotes specific anxiety. That's the other one for it. Because actually, PSA testing is very controversial. And yet we do know that the PSA gives you an indication as it might be cancer. The PSA itself is not a test for prostate cancer. It actually was a test to see what size your prostate was. I mean, you do know what the definition of male middle age is. Do you know what the definition of male middle age is? It's when your prostate's bigger than your brain. That's what the definition of male middle age is. I know. I'm 67. So it's not a test for prostate cancer, but it does give you an indication. And the beauty of a PSA test is if you get it checked at the age of 50, then when you get it checked again at the age of 55, because you might have a problem, whatever, you've got something to compare it with. That's what makes it useful. Because if you haven't had that earlier test, then you've nothing to compare it with. You don't know whether it's rising, whether it's stayed the same, or is it falling. Now, for the men in the room, don't go to the doctor and have your PSA checked if you cycle to the surgery, okay? that irritates the prostate, and it'll go up, your PSA will go up. If you had flu very recently, don't get your PSA checked because it'll be high. Any inflammation causes an increase in PSA. But you have a very special interest in this, haven't you? Say who you are, and just very briefly tell us your story about your husband.
Hello, I'm Priscilla Manesco, and my husband was diagnosed with prostate cancer in 2011. The summer before, in 2010, when he went for his 3-monthly check to the doctors, because my husband used to have PSA checks, and it was slightly high, but the doctor said it wasn't important. But when we went home and discussed it, I decided really that if we waited another 3 months, and then it was decided to send to the consultant, it would be another 9 months. So we went back to the doctor that week and we said, refer us to the consultant now. So in 6 months' time, he's already got an appointment to see the consultant. Anyway, in between he had another episode, and we then went to UK in the following January, and then he was diagnosed. He had a biopsy. We weren't aware because we were told, I don't think it's anything. It was rather a shock. He then had treatment. He was okay. And then the year before last, he developed a gallstone. And then 2 days later, he had a stroke. And then 2 months later, the gallstone was not a gallstone. His gallbladder, was cancerous and had metastasized to the liver, and he passed away. So I'm really here because he was from the prostate cancer, and he was very militant about this, men's health, and that's why I've decided to come, because he started a group of men used to go once a month to talk about their problems. So I know he would have wanted me to come and share this. So
proud of you being able to do it.
And as well, he was always very. He was also belonged to a users forum, the GHA users forum, and he was always fighting for other patients, because, as you're saying, the doctors, but some doctors unfortunately think you are a malingerer or that you are a hypochondriac, or so. Not all of them, I have to add, but I think some doctors also need to be educated.
I think that is very fair comment, and that's coming from a doctor. I think your comment is very fair. This is the name of the game here now. Is if you are really concerned about this, then keep on about this. And you know, there's so much information now on the likes of Google. There's so much information out there. Part of the problem actually is filtering out the rubbish from the useful information when you're on there. But there is so much information out there. Can I just ask a question of the men in the room? Okay, how many of you, put your hand up if you don't mind, are over the age of 50 and you have not had a PSA test? Not had a PSA test. Put your hands up. Okay. Right. Okay. Right. Now then, just as a matter of interest, are you now considering going to get a PSA test? It's painless to get your PSA checked. I would. No. Let me come back to you.
Can I say something about the PSA? Because I know men, and my husband was very thought very strongly about this. I don't know whether it's still happening, but men used to go to the health center because he advised them to go, and when the doctors ordered a blood test, the PSA test, they were stopped at the laboratory because it was not cost effective. I know that for a fact.
Oh dear. Right. Okay. I think if there's any public health people here, I'm sure they'll be interested to. Incidentally, you're a teacher. Is anybody here being taught by this lady? My God, what a small world Gibraltar is. My wife's a teacher, and honestly, as you walk down the street, everybody's going, "Hello, Mrs. Banks. Hello, Mrs. Banks." And as they're walking down, yeah, it's very nice actually.
My husband went to Liverpool
I used to teach in the Open University. I was one of the first teachers at Open University. I was very proud of it. Really? Well, listen, we'll have a chat later on. Okay, anyway, right, so next slide, please, Stephen. Now, this is part of the problem. Okay, now this is an actual poster from the British Department of Education to address adult illiteracy. Right? And they wondered why nobody phoned up. Now, that's the level of intelligence that we've got governing the country. Right? That's an actual poster. Next slide, please. So this is what we did. We produced these kind of things, which were specifically designed for men. And they targeted men in a way which we knew that they thought. And men tend to think in like staccato little brackets. They think, is the baby hot? Yes, no. Is the baby sweaty? Yes, no. Does the baby have spots? Yes, no. You see? And at the end, it's like, right, go private. No, I'm only joking. So that's the way that the male brain works, like a set of algorithms going down. And so we designed, rather than telling men off for thinking that way, we said, right, how can we use it to their advantage? Most times we just wag the finger at men and say, it's your fault, you're fat, you've got a Y chromosome and a prostate. It's all your own fault, mate, kind of thing, Instead of saying, right, what is it about men? How do they think? How can we use the way men think to their advantage instead of to their disadvantage, which is the way that we constitute. So we produce these kind of things. Where you give men choices, where you give the guy a choice of what to do, including do nothing. Don't do anything. Just leave it. Let's see if it goes away. But give them an informed choice. Give them information where they can actually make a decision on what to do. And if they want to just not do anything about that, at least they know what the consequences could be if they didn't get it sorted out. At least it gives them a chance to do something about it, rather than just dismissing them as being stupid kind of approach, which unfortunately is what sometimes we tend to do. Next slide, please. And we're coming to the end of the talk now, and we're going to involve all our experts now, and hopefully you guys who there was an expert question from a non-expert. That's what the kind of question we want to hear, because it's so incisive, that kind of question. Now, this is a North Sea helicopter, came down and crashed with 16 crew sitting on the aircraft, and they all died. And thanks, they all died. Now, when they looked into this, they said it's an accident. Oh, sure, it's just an accident. Accidents happen. We know accidents happen. Isn't that right? Okay. But when they looked at it a bit closer, they found out that there was a fault in the helicopter, and the company knew there was a fault in the helicopter. In other words, they knew there was a difference, and they didn't act on it. And these men all died. And that was then opened up as a coroner's inquest for negligence. Next slide, please. But maybe this is the reason. Maybe this is the reason why men die early. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe we're just stubborn. But you go ahead, no problem. Or maybe this is me and Ian Pete here, jumping for joy here, because you guys are now going to look at men's health much more seriously and get men to go on to see their doctors sooner. Now, I have to tell you, there's been a bit of airbrushing going on here, but only in my case, not in Ian's. So, right, can we have the switch off the slides for us, please, Dave? Now, okay, right, where's our cancer charity people? Where's our cancer charity? Now, tell me what you think so far in terms of your experience of men and cancer and early diagnosis. Oh, you're a nurse as well, isn't that right? Yes, okay.
Well, in my experience, I'm Linda. I work for the Cancer Relief Charity at South Barrett Road. I've been here for 2 years. Used to work at the Royal Marsden and in a hospice. Most of the people who come to us are ladies, very rarely men, although we do encourage all people, young and old, and we are getting a lot more. But it's often the wives that ask for help for the husbands, because the husband always too busy, put everything out of their minds, won't admit they've got a problem.
So can I just ask, just give the microphone right to you. You've experienced this in a completely different area, so just give me your insight as well.
So I'm Christine, I'm the breast care nurse. Well, first of all, we haven't had a patient diagnosed with breast cancer, male patient, since I've been in post for 8 years. So that's good news.
But there is something very important though. Who's going to be the carer of somebody with breast cancer? Who almost certainly is going to be the carer of somebody with breast cancer?
So that husbands, partners, family are going to be the carers.
And who is the information about breast cancer usually directed towards?
Usually it is directed at the patient, for the patient.
But you have an exception to the rule.
But we do. We do. We rely on our organisation in UK, Breast Cancer Care UK, for all our patient information. And we do have a specific information booklet for partners of patients with breast cancer. So we do try to give that out if it's needed.
So this is a lady to come and see if you have got a partner who's looking after somebody with cancer. We're going to get this microphone to you. You're a former MP, so you know these things. So you hold on to that there a minute, because Isabel is very much involved in integrating care, in organising care. Tell us what the big issues are with regard to looking after somebody with cancer in Gibraltar, not in London, in here, in Gibraltar. What's the big issues? Yeah. Tell us, Isabel.
Well, I'm Isabel. I'm the Cancer Services Coordinator of the Health Authority. And this role was created in order to look at these issues, to find trends, to look for the gaps in care, and try and come up with some solutions and work together with the team in order to improve services. And I think initially the biggest issue we faced, and this was about 2 years ago now that I started, was communication. This idea of shared care between primary, secondary and tertiary care in the community as well with the charities, and sharing that information to make sure that the care pathway is as seamless as possible. So I think we've done a lot of work there to try and improve on that. And it was looking at standardizing a referral process to make sure that the GPs were actually communicating with the consultants in a sort of standardized way, and that information was accessible to all working within secondary care. A difficulty we also faced was getting oncological information from tertiary centres outside of Gibraltar. So the oncology reports, opinions of the radiologists and pathologists and consultants at the Marsden, in Pamplona in Spain, for instance, or at Zanet or at St. George's, wherever it was, because it was important that patients in Gibraltar had a consultant to go to, and there was ownership here in case, the patient needed support. So again, we've done a lot of work in making sure that these centres are communicating with us and that we're making that information accessible to the healthcare professionals here. And as a consequence of that, we've now set up a chemotherapy unit, and that works very well. And for about the last 10 months, we finally have our own weekly oncology MDT meetings, and that has been the best thing possible for...
MDT, explain what...
MDT is multidisciplinary team meetings, and that means in one place, in one room, we have the pathologist, radiologist, the radiotherapy oncologist, the chemotherapy oncologist, plus the consultant doctors who are talking about their patients, and specialist nurses. So everybody gets their heads together, they look at the pictures, they look at the pathology results, they discuss the patient, and they decide, right, this patient needs this treatment or that surgery. And that's great. Before, it was right to the Marsden and wait, a few weeks for a response and so on. Now it's all happening here.
Yes, it used to be. MDT working is the biggest step forward in looking after cancer, even before treatments, actually. It is the single most important thing. You didn't mention the GPs, incidentally. It's starting to see them now coming into MDT work. Where's our public health nurses? We took the public health nurses, no. Because what I wanted to ask them...
Director for Public Health.
Down the bottom here, oh yes, of course. Sorry, I do apologise. Chris, who wants to answer this question? You want
Tell me, what's the question?
I just said, did anybody see the Boris Johnson? Listen to Boris Johnson on the radio. Right? It was wonderful stuff. Honestly, go into Google, look up Boris Johnson interview, BBC 4. Fantastic. You'll laugh your leg off. You really will, honestly. I want to ask you a serious question. If you had a magic wand now, as the head of public health, if you had a magic wand over Gibraltar and you could wave it and something happened instantly that would prevent cancer in one of its worst possible forms, what would it be? What would you wish for?
Easy. I just banned smoking.
Absolutely. Gibraltar has got a very low level of smoking, isn't that right?
No.
What is it like?
It's about 33% prevalence, which we got from our health and lifestyle survey last year. And compared to that, in the UK, it's 25% or so, and it's coming down.
Okay. I went into a shop on the way up here. There were cigarettes there, which he was basically giving away. He said, well, please just take them, they're in the way, you get rid of these cigarettes. They were about a shilling or something, I don't know, 10p a packet or something. There was something unbelievable price. And a litre of alcohol sat next to it for £3. My God, you know, alcoholics and smoking, I mean, this has got to be it. So thank you very much for that. That's what I would wave. I would wave that magic wand as well and get rid of cigarettes. In Dublin, you used to be able to not see the person you were sitting next to in the bar because there was that much smoke. I kid you not, in Dublin. It was great actually for me because the girls couldn't see how ugly you were until they got outside and saw you in the light, you know, because the smoke was there. So it was very handy for chatting up to women. But anyway, we have come to the end of our discussion, and it's lovely to end on a note where we could do something about it. We could actually get rid of lung cancer. Imagine being able to say that. And lung cancer has definitely been hammered in some parts of Europe because of the ban on smoking in public places, and incidentally, by putting the price up, that has also stopped people from smoking. It is in our gift to prevent lung cancer. I'm going to bring this to an end now, everybody, and I'm sorry for those of you who haven't had a chance to come in on this, but I do hope that you've picked up some of these messages that we've been talking about for cancer. And we're going to hold another one. What's the date of the next one? And here we are. And we're going to be talking about a very, very difficult one about mental health and men. So if you think that's been useful, bring somebody with you, especially a man who can actually come along to talk about mental health, because it's one of the worst areas for people to talk about, especially men. They find it very, very hard to talk about mental health. So find it hard to talk about most health issues, but especially mental health. And that's possibly why suicide is so much higher in men than it is in women. It's very high in low-income group men especially. Okay. Big thanks to Stephen for all the work. Big thanks to all of our experts for coming. And I know you're all very busy people. And thank you very much for taking the time. Big thanks to Ian Pete, who's done all the organising, and Chris, who's been organising all of this. Thank you very much for coming along and introducing us. But especially thank you for people just coming along to just listen and chat and ask exactly the right kind of questions about men and cancer and how we can do something about it. Thank you all very much indeed.